fellow Southern Cameroonians, brave warriors of our liberation movement. Today is the 9th of September in the year of our Lord 2019. My name is John Ba Akuro. Yesterday, I was out here talking about a 10 billion CFA francs package doled out to Mr. Paul Biya by the Secretariat General of the United Nations, namely to enable him carry out certain projects which we all conclude to be a package that will provide him the possibility to acquire more arms to continue to pursue his genocidal war against the people of the Southern Cameroons. My dear people, today I am coming to talk about the announced address by octogenarian dictator Paul Biya to the people of La République du Cameroun tomorrow, the 10th of September 2019. But before I delve into that very important discussion, that will hinge very much on information I've gathered from around people in his circles, let me bring this reminder. Flick back. Few weeks ago, I recorded a video, and the key message in that video was a presentation of a leaked letter. That letter was addressed to Mr. Paul Biya by the resident coordinator of the UN system in Yaoundé. In that letter, she was drawing the attention of Mr. Paul Biya to the effect that a new Swiss-based organization known as Swiss Peace was sending delegates to La République du Cameroun, to Yaoundé, to accompany a delegation of the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. And the purpose of the introduction of Swiss Peace was because the people of the Southern Cameroons, and perhaps some in La République du Cameroun, or call them stakeholders, were resisting the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue that was picked by the Swiss federal government to conduct the negotiations between La République du Cameroun and the people of the Southern Cameroons. That letter indicated that HD was facing a lot of difficulties being accepted by the stakeholders, reason they were bringing in Swiss Peace. And in that letter, and this is what is most important, this lady warned Mr. Paul Biya that if nothing were done in the area of ensuring that concrete actions are taken before the holding of the UN General Assembly this September, there were going to be consequences. I'm not therefore surprised that after staying mute, after still insisting that they will not discuss the form of their state, after still setting a lot of roadblocks, even for the holding of the watered-down Toumi-led AGC, that's the Anglophone General Conference, Mr. Paul Biya today opts to address the nation. It's 3 years and counting since this conflict started. Mr. Paul Biya has addressed the people of La République in traditional messages several times, but simply ignored what was happening in the Southern Cameroons. But that he has decided at this specific point in time to address this particular issue in a special message should be a clarion call, should be a clear indication to our people that Mr. Paul Biya knows exactly what is ahead. That Mr. Paul Biya knows exactly that the only way to go around the international system is to hash another ploy. That said, let us get into that speech. And I guess that by now, those who doubted, the doubting Thomases, who felt that the letter that I was presenting was a kind of fabrication or was of no importance, I guess you can begin to understand right now that as a matter of fact, we have a very sophisticated system of following up everything that is happening in the very close circles of Mr. Paul Biya. This is necessary for the freedom our people seek. This is necessary to ensure that the aspirations of the people of the Southern Cameroons to self-determination, which is an inalienable right, will not be drowned. My dear people, from talks I've had with experts in Mr. Paul Biya's circles and those who are familiar with the message he has been preparing to send out to the world lately, it comes out that one of the things Mr. Paul Biya is going to talk about tomorrow or this Tuesday will be about constitutional reform. Take note that virtually everything that will be in that speech will constitute what is called a bait. I guess you all understand what I mean here. He will simply throw things that will seem so attractive, that will seem so real, so that people with feeble minds, people with very short memories, would easily begin to say, oh, finally, things are going to be different. Do not forget that Mr. Paul Biya is a manipulator. Do not forget that Mr. Paul Biya for more than 37 years has lived on what is called make-believe, has lived on promising and never fulfilling not even one of his promises, and that he cannot change. No. An old monkey doesn't learn new tricks. If you want to doubt it, look at the kind of people Mr. Paul Biya has appointed in his cabinet. For all these years, they are the same people, year in, year out. A clear indication he doesn't change. He doesn't believe in change because he says that he is already changed, and changing anything means you want to change. So do not expect anything new from Mr. Paul Biya. He is going to tell you all the flowery things, but trust me, nothing will come out of it. So like I said, he will talk about constitutional reform and it will be a promise. He's not saying exactly what is to be put in that constitution. It will be a promise. He may definitely tell you that yes, right now the form of state is going to be discussed. It will only be a promise. If you are doubting this, go back to 1993. Look at what happened at the tripartite conference. Discussions at the tripartite conference were so rich, were so promising, but do not forget that in 1994, the people of the Southern Cameroons, because of massive disappointment that none of the promises from the tripartite conference were being met, had to put in place the Southern Cameroons National Conference, the SCNC. An indication Mr. Paul Biya never keeps to anything. In 1996, it came up again with a new ploy, and they put in place a constitution that to the rest of the world seemed the most democratic and the most watertight constitution, meant to make the society enjoyable to all. Look at that 1996 constitution. How many articles have been implemented in that constitution? Until this day, Cameroon remains the only country in the world that operates on about 3 different constitutions, and they apply the laws from each of the constitution as suits their whims and caprices. And even the 1996 constitution, that has not been applied even 1/10, at least the only articles, specifically Article 6, bearing on presidential mandates, that has been applied, has already been revised at least twice, or maybe even thrice. That tells you the kind of character that you are dealing with. I'm also told that Mr. Paul Biya has been contemplating granting presidential pardon to Sisiku Ayuk Tabe and co. And I've also been told that that is why the judges at the military tribunal were under the clock to make sure they handed down a harsh judgment, a very harsh judgment, as fast as possible. And that is why we were all told by those who managed to witness that cabal, that the judge was reading the judgment, was reading the sentence transmitted to them on cell phone, reading from there and writing and then, presenting at the same time. And the reason was because they needed to give a very harsh sentence to prepare the scene for Mr. Paul Biya to come and grant state pardon, so that they will now say he is very magnanimous. That is why what you call the carrot and stick approach. Exactly what the colonial SDO for Meme in Kumba was exacting on our people there. Send out soldiers to confiscate their goods Saturday and Sunday, and then bring the same goods that it is auctioned at very, giveaway prices to the same people from whom he dispossessed of these things. That's what you call the carrot and the stick approach. Beat you, torture you, maim you, and everything, and then call you and give you food and expect you to say thank you. Mr. Paul Biya, Sisiku Ayuk Tabe, Patterson Wilfred Fomba, Banfo Ngalamfo, Barrister Eyambe Elias Ebai, Barrister Shufa Blessevism, Dr. Ndoche Fidelis, all of those people, Mancho Bibixi, Senator Penn Terrence, Babila Vena, all of those people committed no offense. They didn't have to be in prison in the first place. They didn't have to be tried in a kangaroo military court in the first place. They didn't have to be tortured in the first place. That today you will feel that perhaps coming to contemplate either commuting the sentences or granting state pardon is going to, to be something that we celebrate. It is an obligation for you to do it because these people are guilty of nothing completely. They committed no crimes. They committed no offense. They deserve to be freed. And they don't only deserve to be freed, they deserve to be freed with reparations paid to them for all the trouble that they have gone through. And I like this to be absolutely clear. I like to say this. On another note, I've also been told that Mr. Paul Biya has been advised by his friends at the United Nations General Assembly to throw another bait in the form of granting general amnesty to all Southern Cameroon's activists and leaders who are out of the country, to ask them to come back home, that they should sit together, that now constitutes what he will now call in a national dialogue to discuss the problems he will say are plaguing his country. Let me make this clear. In 1990 and 1991, when I was in Form 5 at Lycée Bileng Bafoussam, in a government bilingual secondary school then, at the time it was COS Bileng Bafoussam, Government Bilingual Secondary School Bafoussam, I recall we were on the streets. I was on the streets. That is when the wave of democracy was blowing across Africa. I participated in marches on the street where we sang all of these things. I recall Conférence Nationale, Amnesty Générale, and all of those things. Oh yes, some measure of it was granted to bring in some old friends like Dakole Daisala and the others. But a good lot of other people who fell to that ploy of general amnesty came in only to be granted slow death. It turned out to be a trap. Mr. Paul Biya, we already know what books you read. We, Mr. Paul Biya, already know what kind of people advise you. Mr. Paul Biya, we already know your objective anytime you make any pronouncements. The people of the Southern Cameroons will not fall into this trap anymore. If you want to doubt, because I say he's going to make promises and throw baits, look at the promise he made when the consortium rose in 2016 and negotiations were going on right up to the 13th of January 2017. Mr. Paul Biya's government promised to address the shouting need for teachers of English language expression to teach in our Anglo-Saxon technical education subsystem. They promised to recruit 1,000 bilingual teachers. I don't know what that meant. But at the end of the day, the recruitment did take place. How many of those people came from the Southern Cameroons? How many of those people had our background who were to come in and, close this yearning gap? Less than 100 Southern Cameroonians were part of that recruitment finally. My dear people, I want to say an African proverb we all know, that no matter how much rain pounds a tiger, pounds a leopard, it will never wash off its spots. No matter how torrential the rain is, it will never wash off the spots of a leopard. Never. The spots will remain there, and it will remain a leopard. No reason, therefore, to think that Mr. Paul Biya is about to change. Take another look again at yet another initiative that came up to handle the problems of common law lawyers who complained of a serious and shouting shortage or even no training at all of common law magistrates at ENAM. Mr. Paul Biya answered by creating a special section for the common law at ENAM, and they launched a recruitment for a special recruitment to train common law magistrates. And what did Mr. Laurent Eso say even before the recruitment proper was conducted? He said, when they say Anglophones and all whatnot, it is not a tribe. So do they mean that when they launch that exam, they will say only people who are, born, whose parents and all are from the Northwest, Southwest will take that exam? It set the scene for what was going to happen. And of course, at the end of the day, how many Southern Cameroonians were taken in that special recruitment? They claimed again, at least 70% of the places. That is why the Cameroon Bar, led by a Francophone from La République du Cameroun, after holding talks with officials of the Ministry of Justice concerning their planned industrial action from the 16th of September, and after receiving a lot of promises about the creation of commissions as usual, came out and said, we have learned the lesson that this administration, this system does not believe in ever keeping to its words. It is action we want and not promises. That is why they have now insisted that they will go on with the sit-down strike, all the promises made notwithstanding. And now, Mr. Paul Biya will definitely announce national dialogue. Of course, we have been told several times by people in his administration, by Tanga Ponji. We have been told by people at the Prime Minister's office. We have been told by people here and there that dialogue had already taken place. That dialogue was almost complete. And when Mr. John Gute learned, or when Mr. Paul Biya learned that the UN Security Council was going to have an informal session on the situation in the Southern Cameroons, he quickly dispatched Mr. John Gute Joseph, his puppet prime minister, to go to the Southern Cameroons and stand in the streets, in the markets, where people are doing their things to get what we call captive audience, and start making noise there. And at the end of the day, when he returned, they said that was dialogue. That is dialogue a la Paul Biya, dialogue a la Cameroonese. And with that, it was to fool the officials at the UN Security Council that something was being done. And now, therefore, at the approach of the UN General Assembly, Mr. Paul Biya's advisors in New York have told him, come out there, make promises, because if you don't do, the Secretariat General will not be strong enough to vouch for you, will not have arguments enough to give you the time that you need. That is why Mr. Paul Biya will come out and talk about dialogue. Guess who will be called to the table for that dialogue? If you doubt, look at the composition of ELECAM and the composition of the Constitutional Council. What do the laws say? The laws say the members of ELECAM will be people drawn from the civil society who are independent, who are not committed to any political party. But we saw Mr. Paul Biya appoint members of the Central Committee of his party and claim that they had resigned, and nobody ever saw when they resigned. They just resigned overnight to qualify to be there, to continue to maintain Mr. Paul Biya in power. It is the same thing with the Constitutional Council, where at least 95% of those who are in there are of the ruling CPDM party. There is nothing to expect from that system. Expect at least Mr. Paul Biya to say that he throws his weight behind the forum of African leaders, of former African leaders, on the situation in the Cameroons. Because at least there, Mr. Paul Biya believes that he is going to meet his old peers who have been doing the same thing, a good lot of them, often to their people, and who have been used to coming in when there is trouble and saying, since this man is a thief, and he has already stolen it, and the item is already with him, just leave it with him, and then take a little share of it, so that the status quo is maintained. That is where Mr. Paul Biya is definitely going to throw his weight, as I've been told. My dear people, do not think he's not likely to talk about the Swiss-led initiative. I hope he does. We will keep our ears to the ground and to listen to what Mr. Paul Biya says. But let me make this clear. My dear people of the Southern Cameroons, we are not in 1960. My dear people of the Southern Cameroons, Niccolo Machiavelli was not born in this age. It is not today that we shall be tortured and then handed food, and then we are expected to say thank you and call the same person that have been torturing us our Messiah. Oh yes, do not forget the sin with the Communist Party, where Lenin, in the presence of members of his party, took a cock, treated that cock so poorly, took out feathers in a way that gave that cock excruciating pain. And after that, when he threw the cock on the ground, everyone expected the cock to run away. Of course, it started running. And Mussolini now threw corn, threw grains, and the cock started rushing towards it and wagging its tail. That is thanking the same torture. That is the book from which Mr. Paul Biya reads and believes that he will be able to deceive the people of the southern Cameroons once more. Let me end with this and take note about it. That anytime you settle for less than you deserve, you end up with less than you ever settled for. My piece of advice and take home, never settle for less than you deserve, because you will always end up with less than you settled for. I will be back after he makes that address to his people tomorrow. To God be the glory.